Hello ladies and gentlemen, and would you like a fresh, cool glass of Coca-Cola? I've just realised how absolutely prominent that is on my t-shirt, and it looks like I'm shilling for, you know, big, what, I don't know, what's the phrase, big cola or something? Not intentional, I just like the t-shirt. Anyway, today we're going to talk about something that I realised basically this morning as I was trying to decide what to stream yesterday, except I'm recording it. Look, we won't get into the time specifics of this because it will just get me confused and my head will explode. Essentially, I was wondering what to stream, and I keep getting drawn back to streaming Dark Souls 3. Now, I've already streamed Dark Souls 3 in its entirety. I've done 2 playthroughs of it on stream, all doing Jolly Cooperation, and now we've done the DLC as well. Side note to this, the first DLC, the Ashes of what's her name? Okay, not my favourite. Ringed City, thoroughly enjoyed it, absolutely loved it, although suddenly introducing the mechanic of not falling to your death when you drop off something tall messed with my mind something unbelievable and made me even more paranoid because I just assumed that with every ledge that you were told to jump down, there would be one where you jump down and die because it's Dark Souls, and Dark Souls loves doing that shit to you. I mean, look at the way it deals with bloody chests and mimics and all that shit. Oh, look, it's a nice chest. Oh, there's items inside. Oh, look, oh, the chest's eaten me. I was fully expecting that all the way through, and I thought the fact that that mechanic was in there was a brilliant little way of introducing some tension into what otherwise would have been just a, oh, well, I mean, we're always used to that. You know, the fact that usually you just die, and then suddenly now, oh, the rules have changed. You don't die dropping off stuff that's that big anymore. I liked it. It was good. But I was trying to work out why it is that I keep getting drawn back to playing Dark Souls 3 again. Now, I only ran through Dark Souls 1 once, really. I had other characters that got partway through the game, but I never sort of ran through the entire thing more than once. I got like halfway through Dark Souls 2, but I just didn't enjoy it enough to carry on. Dark Souls 3, I've gone through the game once on normal difficult, well, once on new game with one character on stream. Then I went through the game again with another character which I played solo only. Then I went through the game again with the original character on stream. And then I went to New Game Plus with my other character. And then we did the DLC. And now I'm having to resist the urge to go through it again. And I had for a while thought that Transistor was probably my favourite game, just in general, of all time, so to speak. I think it's been overtaken by Dark Souls 3, and yet, in a way, I'm playing it wrong, because I vastly prefer playing it in co-op mode. Like, I much prefer summoning people, and actually, you know, playing with a group, which, I know I've said before, that's not playing it wrong. Like, I know there's a lot of people who are like, oh no, well, you know, if you summon people in, you're not playing it right, it's all about the challenge, it's all about the grind. It's like, well, for you, maybe. But for me, I much prefer playing it that way. But it's only just occurred to me, kind of, what effect that has in terms of difficulty, and the way that difficulty scaling works in Dark Souls 3. And I'm sure this is one of the biggest reasons that I like it so much. Because with a lot of games, you basically have the option at the start. You know, do you want to go easy? Or story mode, as quite a lot of games now put it. Do you want to do normal, which is usually not too bad. Hard obviously gets fairly difficult, and then, you know, for quite a few titles there's fuck you, you're going to die at every turn difficulty, or in fact Iron Man, where, you know, once you're done, you're done. Dark Souls doesn't have a system like that, and I think it actually has a much better system in the way that difficulty scales, and the way you can make the game harder or easier depending on what you want. Because when you start Dark Souls, there's no option for I just want the story. There's just no option for that. You play the game and that's it. And as you go through, you basically invent the difficulty levels yourself. So if you, for instance, want to go absolutely hardcore mental off your face, you go naked with a club, start as maybe deprived, and do a soul level 1 run. Which I'm never ever going to attempt in my life because I know I'd fail miserably and it would just not be worth doing. Like, I wouldn't be able to do it myself. But people do that. It seems to be widely reckoned to be the hardest way to play the game. Because after all, you've not built up any stats outside of stuff that you'll get from armour. Even the choice of armor and stuff that you can use is severely limited because, well, you're still level 1, which means you don't have any upgrades to any of your stats. So you can't boost up your strength or your dex to make certain weapons work better or anything like that. It's pretty much the bare bones experience in terms of what you can do to your character, which of course vastly increases the challenge because the game is made with the kind of expectation that you will level up as you go along, because that's what most people do. That's part of the design of the game. So not leveling up, not improving your character in any way beyond picking up new gear, does make it way, way harder. And that's one of the things that I think is so brilliant about that franchise that I hadn't even really considered before. The fact that there's this built-in difficulty sort of scale where you can decide how hard you want to make the game. But like everything else in Dark Souls, it's not just handed to you. It requires a little bit of imagination. Whereas other games, it's story mode, then you've got normal, then you've got hard, then you've got extreme or Iron Man or something. Instead, you have to approach Dark Souls in a totally different way. And you have to read into it. The same way that you get the story, the same way that you get that kind of atmospheric feel, the way the game, well, the way the world in the game like lives and breathes, you have to get that. Not in a passive way, but you have to look for it, you have to search for it, you have to piece stuff together. And actually, the difficulty levels in that game are exactly the same. If you want to do, just standard, I guess, normal mode, it would be you upgrade your character as you go, you level them up, you spend your souls, you make your character better. Everyone's familiar with doing that, that's how most people do it first time round, I'm pretty sure. But then you can also make it a little bit easier by summoning one person in. Admittedly, yeah, you do get invaders, but if you get invaders, it's still 2v1. I mean, there's a penalty to it, but it's not necessarily a terrible penalty. It kind of makes things not as easy as they would otherwise be with two people running around in the same sort of Dark Souls world. If you want to go full on, you can, most of the time, summon 2 people in. And it goes from being like a challenging game. Even if you know what you're doing, I'd still say it's a challenging game, because if you make a misstep, it can completely ruin whatever thing you're attempting to do at the time. With 2 more people in there, like, for which there's very little penalty if they die. Like, if you summon in 2 people and one of them gets wasted just before the boss, yeah, it's not great. But it's nowhere near as bad as if you died yourself, because then you'd lose all of that progress. I just feel like everyone makes a really big fuss about, oh, Dark Souls is so hard. Dark Souls is the hardest game series. Oh, you're a scrub if you can't finish Dark Souls. I know a lot of that is said in jest, but there is a hint of truth to it. There's a little element of truth to these kind of jokes about, oh, getting good and learn how to play and all that stuff. It is undoubtedly a game that you need to know what you're doing to get the most out of. I think my first ever attempt at playing Dark Souls wasn't that enjoyable compared to when I actually had someone going, oh, well, actually, if you use this weapon, or if you try going here or there, having that little bit of guidance actually improved the game for me, because it gave me a framework on which to build, I guess, an understanding of all the different move sets off all the different mobs, where you go, which order to do stuff in. There's a lot of talk about that side of things. There's a lot of talk about the story and the fact that it's delivered in such a... It is a very different way, and I have to say I really enjoy it. That's one of the reasons I like Transistor so much. Yeah, you've got background narration in Transistor that tells you the story, but there's also a lot of detail hidden in reading stuff, in actually researching and actually looking at the stuff you pick up and going, okay, I picked up this item, what is this? Oh, so this has got something to do with that person, which ties into what we learned earlier. It's very... I don't really know how to describe it. I always want to say like passive, but I think it's more sort of atmospheric storytelling, where just by going round somewhere you can kind of get a feel as to what's going on, and when you pick up items from around that area, it kind of fills in the blanks a little bit. It's all very abstract still, which allows you to draw your own conclusions, which again is something I really like. But again, it's something that people cite a lot. Things like the soundtrack, it gets cited a lot as being one of the great strengths of Dark Souls. And the fact that, let's face it, you can kind of do what you like. There's not like, especially in Dark Souls 1, there's potential there for kind of going where you want Not necessarily straight away, but it's not like 100% linear. Dark Souls 3 maybe a bit more linear, but it still has a nice structure without feeling restrictive. All of those things are good, and they're great things to praise, and they're stuff I want to see more of in other games. But actually, when I really look at it and really think about it, I think one of the sort of biggest unsung heroes of Dark Souls is the difficulty. It's not this linear, this is too easy, this is way too hard. There's so many points in between, but because you have to actually think about it and use your imagination and approach it the same way that you approach finding lore or discovering what happens in different boss fights and stuff, it seems to get overlooked a bit. I don't really see anyone sitting there going, Dark Souls has got one of the best difficulty scaling systems. I mean, we're not even talking about New Game Plus or Plus 3 or Plus 7 or anything here. I'm just talking about the standard, the range between going at it naked with a club at Soul Level 1 all the way through to kitting yourself out in the best stuff you've got, upgrading the shit out of everything, summoning 2 friends in and just going mental on every mob you see, largely because you can. There's so much variance in between. And I think that is kind of, when I realised that, it kind of pushed it over to, finally, Transistor has actually been toppled. I really thought Transistor was pretty much my favourite game of ever. But the kind of realisation that there's an extra bit of depth to Dark Souls that I didn't even consider. Even though I used it myself, even though I've had characters that only go, solo run, and I haven't used an Ember on that character, for instance. Even that is an element of difficulty that I hadn't even thought about. Even that is changing the game just a little bit. It's not a setting, but it's that little extra bit of difficulty that you wouldn't otherwise receive. And I think it just adds on to how fucking great, not just that series, not just Dark Souls 3 is, but how fucking great that series is as a whole. Every time you kind of look at it, there's a little bit of something else that jumps out and makes you go, oh yeah, that's really clever. I really like that. Anyway, that was a bit random, I know, but I had that thought and I was just sitting there thinking about it and I wanted to talk about it. Do you agree? Do you think there is a lot more hidden into that in terms of difficulty than people give it credit for? Or is it just that I haven't seen people talking about it as much as maybe it has been talked about? Do you think that there is a lot of nuance in the difficulty scaling? Do you prefer just the standard easy to ridiculously hard? Or do you like having those little bits in between where the player has to come up with it themselves? Be really interested to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below. I always read them. And as always, there's a link to another video somewhere around here. And there's a subscription thing and a Patreon thing as well. If you want to, you don't have to. Not compulsory. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.